is from the Television Continental. He handles the current affairs at Television Continental. Thank you so much for coming. You're welcome. So just to start by saying again, good afternoon, everyone. I'll soon be out of your faces because I'm eager to hear this powerful panel speak, and I'm eager to learn from the panel. Like Tolulope said, the title today is Masks Not Silent. And we came up with this title at the center after we looked at the situation that we find ourselves as Nigerian journalists. Of course, in the past few months, even before the year 2020, which I believe some people think we should count twice, or maybe we should not count at all. Before this year started, a lot of people, there's been a lot of repression for the Nigerian media from government quarters. There was a time about 2-3 years ago where the broadcasters got a circular that told them what things they could broadcast and what things they couldn't, based on things being labeled hate speech. And then the year started, and some people were still saying Happy New Year when we started hearing the news of pandemic, and then it hit Nigeria. And then the lockdown came. And as the lockdown came, with it came very difficult situations for Nigerian journalists. First, the tussle with men in uniform about moving around. A lot of journalists could not even move around to do their job. Apparently, there's a lot of gap in terms of understanding media literacy and understanding the work of the journalist, even in the country. Also, a lot of journalists lost access to places where they would cover normally. They lost access to information in a bigger way than they had before. Some of you might remember that for the presidential villa, for instance, about 80 journalists were sent out, and the numbers were trimmed to less than 20 because of COVID protocols and all of that. So what happens to all of those other journalists who did not have access to report? And then, we were still on that, and lockdown being eased down. And then we went to the EndSARS protests and all the challenges that came with it, attacks on the media. Some broadcast journalists again had the National Broadcast Corporation issued them sanctions. For those media houses who did not get sanctioned, the pandemic actually put a lot of pressure on the media, a lot of retrenchment, a lot of sacks. Some people had their pay cut in half. Some were told that they were now freelancing for their own organizations, so many challenges. And, we have brought people who have been affected by these issues to this panel so that we do not just speak to them like we do not have the facts. There are people who were touched by it, and we have panelists who are able to speak to that. So it just occurred to us that really it looks like we have been masked, just like we need to wear a mask for the pandemic. It looks like the Nigerian media itself has been masked, and we've had to wear a mask. We've had to go through so much. But we are also certain that we have not been silenced, and that we cannot, in fact, be silenced. Despite all of this has been a great year for many Nigerian journalists. We've had journalists across board who got awards. Kabiru Adejimo of Premium Times was shortlisted for Thompson Foundation Award. Taiwo Adebulo of the Cable, won the 2020 African Fact Checking Award. Fisayo Shoyombo has won many awards this year. So journalists in Nigeria are doing great, despite the situation that we find ourselves in. And despite the fact that, during the protests, some media houses were attacked. Television Continental was, their main studio was burnt down. So we're masked, but we're not silenced. And that is the campaign that we're doing this next 3 days. As a matter of fact, on Wednesday at the award, we're going to have masks that actually have that inscription, "Masks Not Silent," available for everybody to wear, because we feel like it is important as Nigerian journalists that we have our own voice and we speak for ourselves. And we say that the work that we do is to hold the powerful accountable is important. This has been difficult. It has been scary, really. I mean, when I see how many journalists that I know have lost jobs, how difficult it is, how papers shrunk, they actually shrunk from 48 pages to 32 pages in a space of about a month. It's scary to watch. And like the mask, it is very uncomfortable. But we know that just like the mask, it is also going to be temporary. And the Nigerian media will do well, and we will be much better. So again, to welcome you all to this conversation, and to thank you for making time. And I wish that we would have great deliberation. Welcome to our audience. We are great that you were able to sign in, and we hope that we all learn from it and that the Nigerian media is better for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Motunrayo. I appreciate the opening and the welcome there. We have a number of people joining us, so thank you to those joining us. I see somebody joining us from the Anambra Broadcasting Service, also from Radio Nigeria as well. So please don't forget, as I said earlier, share the good news, let people know that we have started the conversations. We are going to be going there. I believe that we don't want panels that will just do the normal. Let's really take the conversations there, and particularly as journalists, I think it's important we do the soul searching. There have been, as Motunrayo said, so many Nigerian journalists who are stellar, who stand out, who've been receiving the awards in acknowledgement of the work that they're doing. But there are also journalists who make it difficult for those journalists every day. So I think it's necessary we question ourselves and we take ourselves there as the need must be. And it is needful right now. We are in times like no other. Very few people in this world have been alive in a time like this, and that will probably be during the Spanish influenza. And we've seen one or two people who survived the Spanish influenza and have now survived the corona pandemic. But the rest of us, millions of us, have never been through anything quite like this before. And through our personal lives, through our everyday lives as Nigerians, and then through our professions, we're trying to find the way through. So this panel is going to be looking at policies, pandemics, and protest, tackling the forces that stifle media independence in Nigeria. And while I was just doing some background, it's important to note that as much as we might say the media is free, that freedom is, for many of us, in words only. There are overt and covert forces at work. There are interests at play. And every single day, I know across media organizations in this country, people are trying to fight to keep the media as free as possible, to keep the independence of the Nigerian press as much as they can. So we're going to look into this in different sectors and in different ways. I'll introduce my panelists one at a time, and then we'll go into the very first presentation so we can get things moving along. So joining me today, I have Tesama Ede Okoye. She is a lawyer, and her first few minutes of her opening remarks will just provide an overview of the existing legal framework for the freedom of the press in Nigeria. We hope that she's going to be able to explain to us the scope and the nature of the freedom of the press. What exactly does that mean? The legal basis of the right to the freedom of the press and the political, social, economic environment. I know the Nigerian press is one of the very few anywhere in the world that is literally enshrined in a constitution. And that's something many of us hold near and dear to our hearts, that we are part of the Constitution. We're part of those who have constitutional duties to the Nigerian public. But what does that really translate to? I also have Simon Kolawole. We all know him as the publisher of the cable, and he's going to look at the damage caused by policies, pandemics, and protests to the media, especially with the focus being on Nigeria. What does the media's independence mean? How does that independence look? What does it look like when you have to put in place policies and pandemics and protests? And using the example Motunrayo gave in terms of during the lockdown, people as media, you see press, but we still had to go through it with sometimes agberos, with police officers, with security individuals who would be questioning why we're on the road, and yet they didn't see us as essential services. Meanwhile, that exactly is what we are. We are essential services. In a pandemic, in a hurricane, in a tornado, if we see police officers and we see medical people going to work, the press is also going to work. I also have Babajide Kolade Otitoju. He will be looking at the TVC experience of how the attack on the station in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and of course the EndSARS protest, how that all has impacted media houses and how they plan to move forward from there. What what effect has that had on the freedom of the press? And that's going to be a personal experience that's coming from the TVC angle of things, as well as the freedom of expression and sustainable media. Many people wonder if media business is a profitable business in Nigeria. Is it a sustainable, profitable venture? Or is it one of where, you just break even, you can just stand right there and be okay? But can you actively make money in the media business in Nigeria? And not just talking about going online, but even with the traditional media as it may be. And then we also have Naziru Makaila Abubakar, who is the editor-in-chief of Daily Trust. He's also going to be looking at how the pandemic, government policies, and the protests have affected the media's capacity to be independent and sustainable. Motunrayo also mentioned the fact that there have been a number of journalists laid off, and we have been hit very hard during these times. What does that mean for us? How does that move forward? How does the Nigerian media, the Nigerian press move forward in regards to a shrinking economy that affects us and everyone around us? So we're going to have the panelists go through about 7 minutes, about 7 minutes of this, have conversation, present their slides if they have any, and then of course we'll get into the conversation. So again, I want to say thank you very much for joining us. This is in honor of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, the 15th anniversary. And on Wednesday, there will be an awards given out for notable journalists here in Nigeria. But between today and tomorrow, we want to have the conversations about media freedom, press freedom, about intergenerational journalism as it is as well, what the next generation holds, what we can look forward to with the next generation, and what our role is with that generation as well. So without further ado, let's get started with our very first presentation. I'm going to start with Tesema and have her start her presentation for us so that we can get things going. Okay, are you ready? Please go ahead.
Hi, Tolulope. Thanks. I'm ready. Can I be giving screen sharing access, please?
Okay, so.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're working on that. Okay, she wants screen sharing access. Please, let's give that to her.
Yeah, I think
okay.
I'm sharing my screen now.
All right, fantastic.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Shema, actually. I know the T throws us off, but it's pronounced Shema. So I'm going to be discussing with us on policies, like Tolu had said. I'm not going to run us through everything again, but I want to look at why freedom of expression, why are we saying what we're saying, why are we doing what we're doing? And so why freedom of expression? Freedom of expression is a fundamental international human right. It is necessary for the healthy, I think my screen is running ahead of me here, so give me a second. Yeah. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right, which we all know. It's necessary for the healthy functioning of a democratic and civil society. I'm not going to run us through stuff we know already, but it is freedom of expression places positive obligations on the state to provide access to information, internet access, and all of that. It encompasses a package of rights. And so freedom of expression, as we know, is also part of those rights that are intimately intertwined, including freedom of opinion, speech, press, information, association, assembly, thought, conscience, belief, and religion. Although the rights can be conceptually organized into 4 categories of expression, association, assembly, and thought, each with distinct meaning, we are just going to be focusing on the freedom of press. Then why freedom of information? This refers to the rights of individuals to access information outside public bodies. Hello? Hello? I think there's someone's voice coming in.
Please, who, if you're not speaking and you're unmuted, please mute your microphone, please. It's only the speaker that should be speaking. Please mute your microphones. Okay, Shema, please continue.
Thank you, Tolulope. So freedom of information refers to the right of individuals to access information held by public bodies and relevant private institutions. It is also often referred to as access to information or the right to information. Regardless of whatever it's called, the legislation fosters the right to know. Everybody has a right to know. Everybody has access to public information. And so we say access to information is your right. Freedom of information is a fundamental human right and the touching stone of all freedoms to which the UN is consecrated. And another quote says, freedom should be bereft of all effectiveness if the people have no access to information. And so it's very important. I'm sure we all know how important the role of the press is in our democracy. Access to information is basic to the democratic way of life. The tendency to withhold information from people at large is therefore to be strongly checked. And so we shouldn't let that happen. So recognition of these rights, I'm just going to run us through the laws and the international instruments. It's recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and the American Convention on Human Rights, the Arab Charter, the European Convention, the ECOWAS Treaty, and the 99 Constitution. So all across the board, all across the world, freedom of expression is enshrined in every law that we can possibly think of. And contemporary free expression issues arising under international law include commercial speech, hate speech, media, homosexuality, and religion. The two most prevalent issues of the past decade have been anti-terrorism measures and the internet. And so we see them trying to gag the press, and we see them trying to gag us, our use of the internet by using terrorism. And we noticed it in the EndSARS as well, when the right to protest is being questioned, and they discuss, are we protecting us against terrorism? Are we trying to guard our free speech? And these slides, I think, will be shared with us. So I'm just going to run through it. And so while the internet has transformed communication, it has also enabled unprecedented state and international surveillance that threatens privacy and freedom of expression alike. And so the public and the governments tend to be afraid of where are we going to with this access to information that we have, and how can we gag information that people gain access to, which is why this conversation is critical at this time. We are masked, but we are not silent. So freedom of information also refers to the rights of individuals to access information held by public bodies and relevant private institutions. Every person has a right to access to public information. So why press freedom? Freedom of the press is a fundamental right recognized and protected by the laws of all modern states. And this right is closely associated with the freedom of speech, and is a component of freedom of speech. Like other human rights, freedom of speech and freedom of express have stemmed from the inherent dignity of man. And so we must understand that when people have access to information, we're respecting their right to dignity. When they have rights to speak, we're respecting their right to dignity. And so Article 66 of the ECOWAS Treaty talks about the press, and it says member states agree to cooperate in the area of information, and to this end they undertake as follows: to maintain within their borders free press, access to professionals and communication industry, and facilitate exchange of information. And a classic case is Haidara versus the state of Gambia. And so let me just run on through. Dawda Haidara was an advocate of media freedom, who was critical of the government, and was one of Gambia's most prominent journalists. He was assassinated in December, and his family members filed an application at the ECOWAS court against Gambia on the grounds that the Gambian government failed to effectively investigate the crime, and in doing so, it allowed impunity, violated the right to freedom of expression, and failed to provide redress. The government of Gambia denied the claims. And it was interesting because if this person is doing his work and the government of Gambia thinks that he should not have redress, and so they don't take the case seriously, and so impunity thrives, right? And so the ECOWAS court determined that indeed Gambia did not properly investigate the crime, allowed impunity, and violated the right to freedom of expression. The court also determined that the Gambian government was obligated to provide redress to Haidara's family because of his failure to effectively investigate crime. This was very interesting for freedom of press because it shows that assassinations don't go scot-free, basically, and you don't say you can't investigate it, even if the person is publicly speaking against the government. So this is a run-through on the overview of the decision. The main issue before the court was whether Gambia was responsible for the violation of the right to freedom of expression concerning the death of the journalist. And ECOWAS court also needed to determine whether the state properly investigated the death of Haidara, whether it caused and tolerated impunity, and whether it failed to provide the applicants with redress. Applicants was Haidara's family. And so the applicants founded their applications on, among other treaties, said that a state breaches international law when it fails to protect media practitioners, including those critical of the regime. The right to exercise freedom of expression, according to the court, includes the right and freedom to openly criticize the government. The ECOWAS court also referred to Article 6 of the revised treaty and deemed that the article imposes an obligation on member states to assure a safe and conducive atmosphere in the practice of journalism, which is very critical, and that applies to Nigeria as well. Thus, the court added that the consequence of systematic impunity has a chilling effect on journalists attempting to exercise journalistic duties and to exercise the right to freedom of expression. The applicants established that the Gambian government did not provide the redress or compensation to the family for the death of Haidara. The applicants also submitted that the state's failure to effectively investigate the crime against Haidara precluded them from obtaining compensation. The court awarded compensation regarding the state's failure to properly investigate Haidara's assassination, and they were asked to pay $50,000 to Haidara's family. And so let's bring it back home to the Nigerian Constitution. Every person shall be entitled to freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart ideas and information without interference. And goes on to say that without prejudice to this subsection, every person shall be entitled to own, establish, and operate any medium for the dissemination of information, ideas, and opinions. And so, like Tolulope said, press freedom is enshrined in our Constitution. So I'm just going to run on quickly through the FOI Act, and the Freedom of Information Act, which also further enshrines the solidity of our access to information and assigns the importance of our right to access to information. And so it seeks to strike a balance between the right to information, privacy, and effective government. It supersedes the Official Secrecy Act. And so because, civil servants tend to lean on Official Secrecy Act to withhold information, but the FOI Act has superseded that now, and it establishes the exercise of the fundamental right to information, particularly the right to access information and record from public institutions. Everyone has a right to access information or records in the custody of public institutions, and which also includes private entities, and people are not required to provide any reason for requesting information or records. So in conclusion, since its inclusion in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right to freedom of opinion and expression has been protected in all the relevant international human rights treaties. In international law, freedom to express opinions and ideas is considered essential at both an individual level if it contributes to the full development of a person and being a foundation stone of democratic society. And that applies to us here in Nigeria, because we can't really exercise a democracy. We can't say we're in a democracy if our information, our right to information and to expression is gagged. And free speech is a necessary precondition to the enjoyment of other rights, such as the right to vote. We need to know who we are voting for. Free assembly, we need to know why we assemble, and we need to be able to assemble freely. Freedom of association, the right to protest is also enshrined in that one, and is essential to ensure press freedom. The state's primary obligation is the security and welfare of its citizens. Section 1499 Constitution, the Federal Organization shall be a state based on the principles of democracy and social justice. Once these rights are taken from us or threatened by any machinery, then our humanity is inadvertently taken away from us. I strongly believe that once we start to take away our rights to freedom, once we start to gag press freedom, and once we start to gag people's access to information, we are slowly taking away from their humanity, and we're slowly taking away from their dignity. And so it's important that we stand up for press freedom. Thank you. I will answer any other questions after this. I know I ran through the slides, but thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Shema. I know that it's a lot, especially when it comes to laws. It's a lot to sort of put into 5 minutes and things. So I will start with this question. I do see a question in our Q&A. So please, if you have questions, send them in to the Q&A so we can have them answered. I'll say this, and it's something I've heard over the many years I was on radio and now back to TV, but all these laws are good. They're good, they're written down, they're on the books, they're there if a family or an individual has the patience, the time and the resources to tackle them. But beyond that, what do? We obviously see that there are journalists in Nigeria whose lives have been cut short. We can talk about the Channel's reporter who was killed January 20th, 2012. There's Fidelis, who was a freelancer who was killed April 18th, 1999. We can talk about Nathan, who works with the Light Bearer. He was killed April 24th, 2010. Even just recently, between the 24th and 30th during the protest, Onifade Emmanuel Palumi also was one of those who lost his life, unfortunately. So for many of us, these are good on the books. They're good laws. They're there. But when it comes to enforcing it, making sure that government is accountable, if they're not responsible, but they are accountable for making sure justice is served, we're not anywhere close to where we need to be. How do we change that situation?
I think that we haven't tested our laws enough. I think that we get tired of the process, and I think that's how we have allowed impunity to thrive. I know that, yes, Nigeria's judicial process can be slow. Yes, sometimes the court processes linger and linger and linger and linger, but our courts work, our system does work. We're just not patient enough to test the process. And again, we also have the ECOWAS court, and the case of Haidara shows us that the ECOWAS court also gives us a way around Nigerian court system. We don't like to actually encourage people to go to the ECOWAS court and bypass Nigeria's court systems.
Mm.
Yeah, but the ECOWAS court already allows you to come there as a first instance. Like, you don't have to exhaust judicial remedies in your country before you can go to the ECOWAS court, which is not bound by Nigerian laws, so to speak. It's bound by the laws of human rights. And so we find that if this is not working for you, if the Nigerian system is not working for you, if you feel you cannot get justice at the Nigerian courts, then use the ECOWAS courts. We have these systems, and we've seen it works with Gambari. I think there's a case against NBC where where the journalists also found justice, where the embassy tried to gag a few corporations. So yes, the system is slow. Yes, we get tired of the process, but the laws do work. We need to test our laws. We need to keep testing our laws. We need to keep showing people that these things work. And if we don't do that, we allow impunity to thrive. And these people think they can get away with it, and we get tired of the process. And so sometimes we get frustrated through the process. But it's sad that we've had a lot of journalists die in Nigeria without justice. But at the same time, we haven't used the courts well enough. We haven't sought compensation, even through the ECOWAS courts, well enough. Because you will find that a Nigerian judge will not rule against, you will find that a Nigerian judge will not particularly rule against an ECOWAS judgment, because those are courts of his peers, right? Those are judges of who are his peers. So he's not going to rule against someone who says, yes, Nigerian government was in breach of so and so rights, and so right to life, right to whatever rights it is that we're having conversations over. So I will end it with, let's test our courts, let's test our systems. They do work. They take time, but it works.
I like hearing that, because from the years I spent on talk radio, and talking about the FOI, talking about government accountability and transparency, that was one thing that I used to stress. We have laws, and let's not make it feel like constitutions cannot be amended. They are difficult to amend, but it is not impossibilities, and we need to test those laws. If it's not working, if it worked 50 years ago, many of our laws do need updates, and if we do not test them, we can't focus on finding the places where they will be updated to work for the betterment of all of us. Shema, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next panelist now. You have a number of questions waiting for you in the Q&A, so just be ready with that, so that you will be able to answer their questions, but just let's keep things moving along. So the next panelist we have right now is Simon Kolawole, and he, of course, is going to be speaking on an issue that many people will be very interested in, and that is the issue of policies, the damage caused by the policies, the pandemic and the protests, but possibly more about the policies and how they affect the media's independence here in Nigeria. So when you look at how the pandemic and the protests affected us, but then when you look at what is important, policies are always with us. Pandemics and protests, quote unquote, can come and go, but policies are always here. Once something enters the books, it can be very difficult to shift. It can be very difficult to amend. Not impossible, but it can be difficult. So I'm going to hand things over to Simon Kolawole now for his presentation. Sir, you have just about 5-6 minutes. I'll be sending you a reminder in the chat, and then we'll continue the conference. Thank you very much. You're muted, sir. Can you please unmute?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Thank
All
you
right, go
very
ahead.
much. I will try to cram in as much as possible into the 5 minutes. Well, we talk about media independence. What is media independence really? Is it that if the media house is not owned by government, then it is independent? Maybe that would be too generous as a definition, because some media houses are owned by private individuals who have political affiliation, who have a business interest. So there's also that proprietary influence on the media outfits, which can also impact on the independence of the media. But I think for the purpose of this discussion, we are looking basically at the media being able to play its role as watchdog in the society. And I mean, talking about free press, about censorship, and even self-censorship. Now, what has happened this year, 2020? A lot has happened this year that I believe has damaged or can further damage media independence in Nigeria. We talk about policies, for instance. Currently, some TV stations are battling the National Broadcasting Commission over the fines that are imposed on them on the way they cover the EndSARS protest. Now, this has always been the case over the years, where NBC slams fines on TV stations. What I've come to realize is that they do not slam these fines on stations owned by the federal government. And so I think the law is skewed, or whatever rules or regulations that they have made for themselves are skewed against independent media. If you cannot report freely, except you follow the pattern of stations owned by the federal government, then that means that is how they expect us to behave. And that is a big problem for media freedom, because you are now, for instance, the broadcast stations, they are not looking, they are not looking over their shoulders that, well, if we run this story, if we do this investigation, if we run this report, the government may come after us. That problem remains. Also, the Freedom of Information Act, very fantastic piece of legislation that took so many years to pass. Some state agencies are still refusing to cooperate. They will just wake up one day, right when you have made some requests, they will tell you, whoa, this does not come under freedom of information. Now you go to court. There was something we went to court for now. 2 years, we are still on it. 2 years. So you see a system that is trying to frustrate you. Very simple information. Abacha loot that you recovered. What are the agreements you had with the lawyers? The percentage they are going to take. Why did you have to take another lawyer when you have paid the lawyer who recovered the loot? We cannot get that. So it's a problem we are tackling. Currently, we are still in court, almost 2 years, if it's not even more than 2 years. Now, concerning the pandemic, we know that it has brought a lot of havoc on the economy. And when the economy has a problem, when companies are struggling, of course, the impact will affect the media. When there's economic problem, for instance, the first thing companies do, or advertisers, is to cut their advertising revenue. And today, media houses rely heavily on advertising revenue for economic survival. So that is one aspect that the pandemic has affected the media strongly, seriously. And if the media cannot survive, of course, you can't even be talking about freedom, press freedom or media independence when they cannot even pay salary. So these are the kind of things that are also causing a lot of damage on media independence in Nigeria. And finally, the protest. Now, I have a different perspective on the protest. It's not just about government trying to censor the media. Now, there's something I'm seeing now. I think I call it mob censorship. And I'm going to quickly cite an example. Because of this Twitter generation that we are in now and what they call cancel culture and all that, a lot of journalists are now afraid to even report facts as they are, because they don't want somebody to go on Twitter and start abusing their mom and their dad. Now, sometime last week, we had a review in the office, a post-EndSARS review. How did we cover it? How did we do? And all those things. And the editor told me that after the riots, he ran a story in which the police said we were also attacked, that we were also victims of this riot, that 22 officers were killed, that the police stations were burnt, and that he reported breaking news, that's how people came after us on Twitter and started saying, oh, you people are working for Buhari, we are going to burn down Cable. Cable is where we are going to burn next. And because of that, he had to quickly alter the story, changing from breaking. So why should you make it breaking news? Why should you make it now? This is a serious problem. It looks like a joke now. If they could go to TVC and burn down TVC, burn down the nation, of course, maybe they are political undertone to that one. The problem is that the moment the media is now afraid to report facts, to follow professional ethics in reporting, because the crowd will come, it's a major, major, major problem. And a lot of people, I was arguing with my editorial team. I said, but why should you change the story? It is the fact. They say, 200 people followed us immediately on Twitter, and they said they are going to come for us. I understand what they are saying. You are trying to reason, you are trying to be reasonable, but at the same time, if they attack you and kill you or harm you, there's no remedy you can get for that. So a lot of damage has been done to the media, and these are the things to just quickly summarize. The regulators, the media regulators, they're a problem. The economic hardship is a problem, and what I call mob, the mob censorship that is now becoming a trend in the media ecosystem. Thank you very much. I hope I kept to time.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. You said a lot that I want to get into, but I can't get into it now because I want to make sure all the speakers have time. But I'm really picking up on this issue of mob censorship of the media, because people are afraid. And we've seen that when mobs are empowered, they can actually become a beast that no one can control. And that really is a very serious issue for us. And the question you asked as you started, I think many people have never thought about it, but it's something we should think about. If a media house is not owned by government, is that what makes it independent? Can we not see an independent media house that is government owned, but is independent in its manner of reportage and its manners, in its manner of putting the news forth and doing, and even, yes, being critical of government. So I think those are interesting places where the conversation will go further, but we'll move on to the next speaker. And then, of course, as more questions come in, we'll pick up the pace of the conversation later. Thank you very much, Simon Kolawole, for that. All right, so we'll move on to our next speaker now. And our next speaker will be speaking from personal experience in terms of really how protest and pandemic can really affect the media business. His name is Babajide Kolade Otitoju, and he is sharing the TVC experience on how the COVID pandemic has also affected the media business for TVC. So of course, the COVID-19 pandemic came, and we've spoken earlier about, unfortunately, journalists and media men losing their jobs, and then the recent EndSARS protest, and that, of course, we all know the attack there and another place and how that has affected the business as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Babajide as well. Please get your questions ready. Let them know on Twitter that we're having this conversation. They can follow the hashtag. They can follow the Wole Soyinka Center as well, so that they can be part of the conversation. But let me hand it over to Babajide now.
Good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I actually woke up late, that's why. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to start by talking about how we've been affected by the COVID-19. COVID-19 sneaked on us like a thief in the night, but it has left a huge dent on our finances. And every member of staff has had to sacrifice. The company said it was not going to let staff go, but we had to forego our leave bonuses. The senior staff had to take a pay cut, a kind of incremental pay cut based on your stature in the company. And that's how we've been able to hang on, because media barons during the pandemic, at the height of it, withdrew patronage. So some of the revenue that naturally should come from adverts did not come in, and we relied so much on advert revenue. Even some of the patronage that we used to get from the states who sometimes ask you to do some documentaries for them, all of that simply ended with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then before we even recovered from that, we had the EndSARS protests. A lot of people simply blame the burning of TVC on politics. It's extremely dishonest to say that, and I will not deceive myself that, it was just the work of some politicians who do not like a certain Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It's dishonest to attribute the attack on our premises to some political elements. The truth is, if you watched during the early days of the protests, on a particular day, one of our reporters was walked out of a rally venue. The protesters had converged on that venue, and he came with the intention of reporting the protests. And he was walked out, marched out of the premises. They were shouting, TVC go, TVC go, TVC go. That video went viral at that time. So they have served us all kinds of warnings because we are faced with a different threat now, a different form of censorship. There is an attempt by a lot of people on social media who are not interested in a healthy debate, who want to see you report events, report activities from their own narrow angle. And once you try to achieve any form of balance that does not favor them, once you try to be extremely loyal to the truth, you then come under attack. Before the attack on our premises, on Twitter, they have been threatening our lives and saying that they will burn our vehicles, that they knew the places that we used to go to, that they will attack us and all that. And on the day that soldiers went to Lekki, against the warnings that some of us, against the advice of a lot of us, they decided that it was time to attack TVC. There could be some elements who saw in it an opportunity. Some politicians and their agents who saw in it an opportunity to attack TVC. But to simply blame what happened on politics is extremely dishonest, because all that one needs to go from October 11, they have been telling us that they will burn down our station. And the people behind this were the protesters who felt that we were not reporting the protest the way they liked, the way they would want it reported. I even had to do a kind of PR whereby I posted some stuff that I had said on TV in support of the protesters. I posted it on Twitter, but they were not placated. They were not placated. So they came, and then on that day, they set ablaze 44 vehicles on our premises. 44 vehicles, including vehicles of visitors, vehicles of staff. And not only that, the outside broadcast vans, each of which cost $250,000 at the time they were bought about 8-9 years ago, were set ablaze. So we lost all the 4 outside broadcast vans in Lagos. All the cameras, all the editing equipment, the production rooms were set ablaze. The state-of-the-art equipment set ablaze, which is, from my estimation, setting us by more than 7 billion naira. How does the company recover? Because we have been trying to restore the full salaries of staff the moment the lockdown was eased. But this came at the wrong time, and staff are finding things really, really tough. Everyone is finding it really tough to get by. What truly worries me is not just the attempt by the army, by the government to muzzle the press, because the attempt by the army to muzzle the press is real. For example, they do not allow people to effectively cover the ongoing war in the Northeast. I remember when Al Jazeera came to Nigeria, the entire Al Jazeera crew was arrested and they were taken to Abuja. If you go to the Northeast and soldiers sight you, they are going to ask who gave you the permission to cover the war. All they are interested in is for the war to be reported just the way they want. So that the propaganda that they push out and the outright lies that they push out to Nigerians will ultimately prevail over the truth. So we can see clearly that even Daily Trust, at the time when Daily Trust tried to report the truth about the war, they locked up Daily Trust. They've arrested foreigners. They've attacked UNICEF staff. They've arrested UNICEF staff. They've shut down UNICEF office. So it's a form of censorship on the part of the army. And the army also employs some NGOs, fake NGOs, that are used to harass the media. You recall that even after the NBC came up with the decision to fine some TV stations over the coverage of the NSAS protests, a certain NGO came out to say that the licenses of Arise TV channels and AIT should be withdrawn. So this is how Nigerian leaders use NGOs, fake NGOs, NGOs that literally only exist on paper, to try to muzzle the press, make it difficult for the press to do its work effectively. There's nothing wrong in having a regulator, but some of what the NBC does, I'm against some of what the NBC does, because you cannot tell us not to use anything, any video that is generated via the social media. That means you are against citizen journalism, because a lot of those videos are products of citizen journalism and they are very useful. Some will be at an accident scene, for example, and simply send us the video, because we can't be in all places at the same time. But to simply put a blanket ban on videos generated via social media and say that we can only put on air videos that were recorded by us, generated by us, I don't think it makes any sense. But unfortunately, the law has effectively put us in shackles. So TV stations are obligated to pay any fine that the NBC claims on them. In fact, the Minister of Information announced recently that the TV stations have gone ahead to pay those fines, just so that Nigerians who are pushing that this kind of censorship should end will realize that that form of censorship has come to stay. I do not have all the time in the world, but I think I have to stop at this point. Maybe in the course of answering questions, I'll be able to throw more light on what we are going through at TVC at this time.
Thank you very much, Babajide. I would say, I have to say, very heartening to hear that staff, and particularly management staff, people made sacrifices so that people would not be laid off. And I really think that's what this kind of business and this kind of profession is really about, those sacrifices so that we all have a job, rather than some people keeping things the way they are and then a few people having to lose their job. So we'll come back. There's a lot in which you said, even the military, the Nigerian government doesn't help its own information management. They want only good news, and that's just not how things are. But at least if they were honest and transparent, they would probably be in better standing with many of the media, but we know that they're not. But we'll come back to this conversation as well. So we have one more speaker so that we can get into the questions. I see a lot of them in the chats, and I see a lot of them with the Q&A as well. But let's get our last speaker here so that we can move on. Our last speaker is the editor-in-chief of Daily Trust, Naziru Makailu Abarkar, and he's going to talk about the pandemic, government policies, and protests also affecting the media's capacity to be independent and sustain itself in terms of his perspective as an editor-in-chief of one of Nigeria's leading titles. So let me hand it straight over to him so we can keep things going. Naziru, please go ahead. On your video, because we haven't been seeing you, and of course, turn on your microphone. There you go. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Tololupe, and all other speakers. It was really engaging to hear some of the thoughts from my colleagues. I think I'll try and skip some of the issues that have been raised already by Simon Kolawole and Babajide. I'd rather go through to pandemic, for example. So when we talk about the pandemic, we had to deal with 103 challenges. For example, there was a health challenge and safety. So we were all trying to be safe and at the same time trying to work. It was difficult because you had the lockdown, and also you had this work from home kind of like, which was a new thing completely for most of our people. So our journalists initially struggled with that. And also that has affected some of the reporting, because you had the pandemic. That was the time when the audience needed the media the most, because there were a lot of misinformation, fake news out there. So you need credible media organizations to come in and give people the kind of messages that they need. So we had to juggle that. And also the lockdown and harassment by security forces. We had quite a number of instances where our editors, for example, they finished production very late. There was a curfew in Abuja, and they had to find a way to go back home. Some of them struggled. There was a time when one of my editors called me around after midnight. Imagine, she was a woman going back home, trying to meet her kids, but then she was stopped by those policemen. They said, even with her ID card, with a special tag, but they said, no, you had to park there. They parked that woman for more than 2 hours that evening, imagine. So it took our personal intervention from the office to talk to the PRO, to talk to this, to talk to that. That was how she managed to get home that evening, you know, that morning, early morning, imagine. And she had to come back the next day. Imagine the situation. So all this kind of like affected our work. But then also you have the other side of the pandemic, which was the revenue aspect. We know this, when we're talking about government policies affecting media and our ability to be independent, it's not only about like ability to write what we want or to report. No, other policies like economic policies also affected the media. For example, the government's policy on Forex and the general economic things, how are they dealing with inflation, for example? For example, if you take Daily Trust, for example, we import all our production consumables, and then whenever we want to do that, we have to now raise Forex. You can't get that through CBN, even through the banks. It will take you months before you get it. So you have to either source from the black market, or you have to buy the consumables internally from other vendors, which is way, way costly. And we are using, because of the amount, the quantity that we are using, we can't afford to be buying from local vendors. So we have to ship our own from abroad. So these are the challenges. So the government policy is terrible. They're struggling to handle the economy, and that is affecting almost everybody, including the media, and it's taking a toll on us. For example, if you take the staff, the little that the staff are earning is shrinking, even without reducing the final take-home, because inflation has gone up. So if you are earning 50,000, 100,000, now you need 150,000 to do what you used to do with 100,000. So these are the some of the policies that are also affecting the media operations. But then you also have this advert circulation, which previous speakers have talked about, but also for us, the print media, also the circulation is good. For if you are a TV news or you are a digital media, which we are also a digital media, people can read or watch from homes. But if you're a newspaper, the way the newspaper market operates in Nigeria is vendor driven. So you have to take it out to people. So the circulation were almost down completely during the pandemic and the lockdown. So also the pagination, which we have also discussed earlier. So you see all these issues that affected us. And at the same time, you employ hundreds of people. So you have to find a way to continue to pay them. You see, so we had to go through all these difficult, keep doing board management meetings, you know, apart from the regular meetings, we now have to kind of like during the pandemic, all my life was about meetings, from one meeting to another. How do we solve this? How do we solve that? You see, so the people that you don't often see in the office, like the board members, they were coming, doing all these virtual meetings to find a way how to cut costs, how to find new business ideas, how to rely on our savings, you know. So that's how we all came out of this. But at the same time, the most important lesson that we took from that is also covering the pandemic at the same time, and also covering the protests. because we had to set up a special task force to cover the pandemic, to collapse some of the beats, because most of them have been shut up. So you have to bring this and that to concentrate on the pandemic. But the difficulty there was access to authorities, because the Nigerian authorities, I had an opportunity to practice outside Nigeria. So practicing in Nigeria is quite difficult, especially if you're dealing with authorities. Mr. Simon had talked about getting access to freedom of information requests, but even getting a simple response from a government authority sometimes takes days, because they don't want you to tell the story. That is that. And when they know that you don't always want to go with one-sided story, you want to balance it. So they use that and they delay you. So that was a difficulty that we also talked, but also there was a business threat as well. Sometimes you hear them saying, okay, you do this story, okay, we'll deal with you next time. You come for your partnership, you come for your advert. But obviously we have to continue to do the stories, because if you don't have the audience, they will not even advertise with you in your paper. So you have to go for the audience, and the audience, the problem with this thing that the politicians don't usually understand is government comes and go. Even if you consider from 1999, how many different presidents we had? Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan, Buhari, and after 2023, we're going to have a new one. So government comes and go. That is why the media needs to be independent and stick with our audience. We have to be loyal to our audience, not to the politicians, because they come and go. So this is one of the lessons that we learned throughout this period. And also authorities labeling media as fake news. We saw the incident during the Lekki, during the NSAS protest. We also had our own incidents where when we were reporting the controversy surrounding the new emir of Zazzau Emirates, the governor had to come out and label one of our reporting as fake news. But we had to tweet him back to say, look, we stand by our stories because we have the records, we have the documents. If you want, we can bring them out. But we never heard from him since. So you see, so these are some of the issues. So these politicians, they will do whatever it takes to silence the media. But it is our responsibility to make sure that we remain factual and also independent at the same time. So I would like to summarize with the protest. The NSAS protest taught us a lot of lessons, which I think the media, I think there is a need for media to kind of like, I was really impressed to hear Mr. Simon telling us with his team about coverage of NSAS. I think the media in general needs to have something similar. Maybe the editors at the top level and maybe some other junior colleagues as well at their own level, because we really need to go back and think about it, the lessons that we learned from that, because on our own, there were so many things difficult to cover because there were no leaders for the protesters, and then the government was not honest enough. So you had fake news in between, and the media was kind of like caught in the middle of all that. So what do you report? Do you report this, the attack on this, you know, the looting there? Do you really need to check with the police? Do you really need to check with the army? So you're there and you have to report. And the social media in the middle is reporting everything live, whether it's fake, whether it's genuine. So how do we do at the media, as a media houses? How do we solve this? I think this is a conversation that we can maybe organize among ourselves. Maybe the Wally Soyinka Foundation can come in as well to help us do this. But I think we really need to have that. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much as well. Thank you to all of the panelists. We're going to go straight into the questions because we have plenty of them both in the chat and in the Q&A so that we can get as many answers as possible for those who are with us. So Shema, this is going to come to you because I know you're a lawyer and a consultant with the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, but there is a question when you were speaking earlier about an update on Lagos State and the FOI Act. they have not domesticated it, or unless that situation of things has changed. So Shema, do you have any updates on Lagos State and the FOI Act?
Okay, so while the question came, I was actually trying to do research to find if I have the latest information. To be honest with you, I haven't gotten any update on that, because while I read the question, I was actually trying to see if I could quickly do a Google search to see if there's information on that. But for now, I have no information on that. What I can do is probably get that information and share it with Motunrayo, and she can share it with the person who asked the question.
So what do citizens do?
Any update?
So to follow up with that, for many citizens, and I know media practitioners were all here, we've run into it. And even though it is a law, it is part of our constitution, we still have people basically being obstacles to that information that not just the public, but the media is entitled to. So what do you expect of the media when you have a state as large and as important as Lagos State, as pivotal and as upfront as Lagos State, being a state that has continued to refuse to domesticate the Freedom of Information Act? What's the next step? Where does the pressure come from to get them to do the right thing?
Because of my legal background, I'll say we use the courts. I don't think we use the courts enough here in Nigeria. I will say we use the courts. How do you now start to file proceedings against the state of Lagos and say that they're in breach of providing access to information? They're in breach of the 1999 Constitution, which enshrines that we have a right to get information. We don't want to use the courts. We feel the process is too long sometimes. We feel like we won't get justice, or the courts will be frustrated. But very rarely do you see judges that want to have their names tarnished. Very rarely do you see judges that want to be known as people who do not stand for human rights. But we do not know that, because we are often put aback by this cannot work. Nigeria is crooked. Nigeria is bad. Nigeria. And so we don't test it. So I would say test the courts. I would say that whatever institution, a class action maybe, or whatever process you can, just file something against Lagos State with the courts and say that you have tried to get information from a particular parastatal and they stonewalled you in the process, and so they're in breach of the Constitution and all of that. And we'll see where that takes us. But we'll never know unless we try, right? We can always be so idealistic about that, but without having to do anything about it, we never know.
Okay, and I like the fact that people are really interested in the FOI Act. This is coming from Olukunle, and he says, do we actually have legal access to information and documents held by government bodies, considering the excuses usually given by these bodies? So for him, the law exists, but is it actually being used, even if it's not in Lagos State, maybe?
We do have legal access to information. Some ministries are free with information. I know Ministry of Mines and Steel is free with information. I know Corporate Affairs Commission is free with information. And even with the new come out that has now lifted the veil on beneficial ownership, they have access to information. So it depends on the organizations and the institutions you engage with. And the truth of the matter is, they do frustrate you. The Nigerian system sometimes can frustrate us if we're very honest and find that you're constantly being stonewalled. But yes, we do have legal access to information. The question now is, how do we gain access, physical access to this information, as opposed to what is written down in the books? And so it's up to us to test the courts again, I would say. If there's a law that protects it, let's test the courts. Let's continue to engage. Let's have the conversations. And the press also plays a major role in this. How often do you write that you have written to these institutions? And how often do you publish that this institution withholds information? How often do you say that these particular organizations do not give information? How often do we call out organizations that are in breach of FOI? We don't do this. And once they don't give us information, we say, well, they've not given us information, c'est la vie. But I think that we need to constantly press and we need to constantly push for what we want. Democracy has to come to us by force, either way. Like, we have to stand for our democratic ideals, and not just sit pretty and saying this doesn't work and I have tried. I think that we need to push harder, and we need to continue to resist until they can no longer hold us back.
Okay, Shema, thank you. I'll still come back to you if we have time. Simon Kolawole, I'll come to you. Your statement about mob censorship, it really seemed to resonate with some people, and I saw some of the comments on the chat. But somebody asked you to offer a solution to this idea of mob censorship, because if the media is afraid of the government, now we're also afraid of the people where do we find ourselves? So David Chidi is asking, what is your solution to this Twitter generation, to mob censorship by the Twitter generation, so that media outfits and practitioners can practice without fear? Do you think that some sort of social media regulation as being proposed by the federal government can actually curb this idea of mob censorship? Simon?
Yeah, thank you very much. I wish I had an answer or a solution to that. Because when you are dealing with the mob, you are not dealing with logic. You are not dealing with facts. So how do you engage with the mob? A simple thing that police said, we were also attacked, we reported and they said they are coming for us. How do you begin to engage? But again, I don't want us to mix it as a Twitter thing. No, it's not a Twitter thing per se. Even before Twitter, we always had mob action. Just on no show you okay, just say somebody's a thief, and they'll go after him, kill him, burn him, put tie on him. So it's and this time I'm telling you something that was almost a victim. I saw some people playing cards, and I knew that they were just manipulating the cards, and I was just saying, don't mind them, they are fraudsters. I didn't know one of them was behind me. And then you know what the guy said? He said, oh, you are picking pockets. He started kicking me. Now, if not that I quickly walked away, or maybe let me just say it was God that saved my life. So if he said I was picking pocket and people descended on me, they will kill me and burn me to ashes there. So when you are dealing with the mob, I don't know if there's any solution to that. They say I'm not somebody who raises up my hand so easily and say there's no solution. But I mean, it's a very big problem. However, about regulating the social media, now we have to be very careful. Our history in Nigeria, government will tell you they are trying to solve one problem. By the time they start using the law, you'll be shocked. You didn't even know that it's you they were coming from. When they did cyber terrorism act under Jonathan, I thought they were talking about terrorism. Until journalists started getting arrested, that anybody who pushed into online, they would say, oh, this is cyber terrorism. And they got picked up by the Department of State Service, detained. So I believe we have enough laws to curb social media excesses. We already have enough laws. There are telecom laws about how you use telecom platforms and all that. We have the cyber law already. So this idea, the way the government keeps saying we want to regulate social media, I have a feeling there's more to it and everybody will become a victim. Because people don't trust that is a printed paper, has a Twitter handle, has a Facebook. So it's not just about the newspaper now. It's not just about the Twitter generation. I'm not very comfortable, especially the way the minister has been going about it. So I'm smelling a rat.
And the thing is, our history of regulation doesn't lend itself to us believing it really is in the best interest of the generality. Simon, let me stay with you. So two people are asking about media building trust. And when you look at people like the Pew Research Institute, and they do polls for you, across the world now, media trust is at an all-time low. Trust in politicians is also at an all-time low. So it's not just in Nigeria, it's around the world. But we are an institution that requires people to have trust and confidence in us. So we have Frank asking about the media building trust, but Daud Olatunji goes a bit further, and he says that apart from other factors stated as contributing to media dependence, what do we need to do for journalists to have life insurance? It seems the media has lost the trust of the masses. Example is the recent attacks on the media organizations and threats to some practitioners. How does the media get back that trust? What do you think needs to be done for us to have the Nigerian people believe us again?
Yeah. Again, we have to look at certain factors when we are discussing the issue of trust. One, Nigeria is very polarized, highly polarized. Okay, we've always been polarized, but these days, ethnic, religious, and political tensions are I would say, an all-time high. So when you are talking about building trust, it's not going, when people have taken positions already, this is my belief. Now, it's going to be very difficult for you to write something that they're not going to interpret one way or the other. So how do you build trust with those people? For instance, some people believe that any crime that is committed in the Southwest is by Fulani herdsmen. Any crime at all. If you follow the pattern now, there's no Southwesterner that is a criminal. If they kidnap somebody, it is Fulani herdsmen. If they shoot somebody, that is Fulani herdsmen. So if you now come out to say no, from investigation, these are criminals, these are bandits, they're not even Fulani people. Then they will say, oh, he's been compromised. Oh, these people they have bought them over. Oh, they want to have access to presidency, so they don't want to lose that access. So how do you begin to build trust with such a person? How do you begin to build trust with such a community? So what has happened in the media now is that we have a very plural media. There was a time people were just talking about the Lagos Ibadan press. I think that one is gone now. So we have a very plural, the ecosystem is diversified now. So I think people are just going to be having trust based on individual media houses. Ones that maybe perhaps appeal to their own sentiment, which is not good, but that's not.
It's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It becomes an echo chamber. So people are only going to look for media that confirm their biases. And in the long run, we can look at the US and Fox News. News example, it doesn't do the society any favors in the long run.
Yeah.
So people are concerned. Babajide, you have a few questions, and I know our time is fast spent. So Babajide, somebody is asking about security. That he was quite concerned with how easy it was for those hoodlums to get access into the studio without stress. Was it not an issue of not being security conscious? This is not to blame the management to observe that. If TVC had made arrangements for a code means of security, the damage might not be as much. What do you think about that? And then Babajide, someone's also asking, of course, about how do we deal with government deliberately spreading falsehood? And I'm one of those who will always say it's that government withholds information, not just because they don't want to share it, but because that's space in which they can say that's false or no, that's not that. They like that tension that comes in the air sometimes. So government is a purveyor of not just spreading false news, but withholding information so that the truth is not there. So then, of course, people are going to fill that vacuum somewhere or the other. So Babajide, what do you think we can do in regards to when government is deliberately trying to spread falsehood using the media, or even withholding information from the media so that somehow it's a different story that gets out?
Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay. It is not as if we didn't make arrangements for security on the campus. On the day that they came, we had an arrest in the Rapid Response on site, but I regret and cited the mob. They took to their heels. They jumped into their van and ran away. In fact, one of them who had his cap, one of them who was going to be left behind, removed his cap and ran with all the strength that he's got to join up with his colleagues, and they left our premises undefended. So it's not as if we didn't make about three. It's not as if we didn't. We knew that they would come, and the night before the attack, we made arrangements to have our premises protected. That's why I said earlier that this is not simply about politics. To say it was simply about politics is to be dishonest. The attitude of some Nigerians who sit on Twitter and simply threaten the lives of other people was what triggered the attack on TVC. I can say it anywhere. We all saw how they were harassing Omotola. Some of them were also threatening to go burn Omotola's house because Omotola, the actress, wanted evidence that there was a massacre at Lekki, you know. So that's that. We tried to protect our premises, but The policemen knew that they were clearly outnumbered, and they didn't have tear gas. They had tear gas canisters. It could have helped. Some of them would have been disoriented and they would have taken to their heels, but they didn't have enough. Neither the ones on campus didn't have enough bullets, and they didn't have tear gas canisters at all. So they knew that they would be overwhelmed, and they beat a hasty retreat. So that was what happened. In the afternoon, we then brought soldiers into the premises. One of the things we badly wanted to avoid was for people to be killed on the premises of TVC, because after what happened in Lekki, we knew that the blowback would be very bad if rioters were shot on our premises. And even the policemen who took to their heels, we had told them that they needed to just fire into the air, that they should not kill anyone. So maybe that played a part, because you could imagine how it would have been reported if about 10 persons were felled as they tried to loot and set the company ablaze. But in the evening, we brought soldiers, and the soldiers were able to restore sanity by shooting into the air, not necessarily killing anyone. So it's not as if we didn't try to protect ourselves. We did, but there were also people from what I've seen on the thread, people also are interested in knowing what really happened on the day. A lot of our staff were injured, especially women and men. A lot of them were injured while scaling the wall. Because the TVC premises is kind of filled, you will see the wall will appear to you not to be high inside our premises. But at the point when you want to jump to the others, you then see that it's so high, more than 7 feet high, because the other side was not filled. So we have people who came away with broken limbs. Some of them are even right now wheelchair bound because they had double fractures. So clearly the intention was to just set our operations back, and they succeeded because they came with even gas cylinders. They came with bottles of petrol, and there were really very many on the day.
Wow. Okay.
And the morale of staff then. On the other part of the story, that is while the government, for political reasons.
Babajide, I'll need you to do this quickly. I apologize because of time.
Yeah, for political reasons, the government will want Nigerians to believe that they are actually doing some things that they are not doing. For example, the successes that have been recorded in the Northeast have been largely exaggerated. As someone who goes to the area regularly, I can say that the army has been lying to Nigerians about the successes as recorded in the area. And there are so many places that you can't go to in the Northeast, but they don't tell you. And they hide their own setbacks. They don't let Nigerians know when they suffer any form of setback. So if people are to go to the area to report the truth, the army will be left terribly embarrassed. So they don't want the war zone to be reported at all. They have their way. Nobody will go to that area to do any form of reporting. So this is what is going on.
All right, Babajide, thank you so much. Naziru, I'll have the last question to you. And that's really just talking about how the media space is now. It's a two-level question, or two-layer question rather. And the first part of it, I'll take it from Sakina Lawal. She's asking, how do we solve the problem of media practitioners being silenced by unpaid salaries and poor welfare? And that's an issue that has been unfortunately recurrent in the media space for a number of years. And then Abigail asked about striking a balance in the face of the democratized media occasioned by the new media. So I'll see if you can combine, if you can answer those two questions as we wrap things up.
Okay. I think the issue of salary, I think it's for the media owners to really sit down and decide the business model that they want to take, because there is no need for you to be bragging as we are a national media, we do this, we do how many copies, we do how many pages, we have these stations and that station, when you actually know that you are not paying your staff, because that is really bad. You rather be a niche kind of like media outlets, find your niche and concentrate on it and run your business on that, because it's about business model, it's about how we run businesses. But unfortunately, some people don't want to do that. And also it ties you down to the failure of our nation and the way the nation is being run, because the government should be able to go after any employer who is not willing to pay. Because some of these media houses, they are not paying because they don't have the money. They do have the money, but just that it's part of them that they feel, and they encourage this idea of brown envelope journalism. You see, by not paying, they say, oh, if you have my ID card, you can go and do whatever you want to do. That's not the way it should be. So I think this is for us, the media owners, to kind of like find a way out to resolve this. Nobody, we shouldn't expect anybody to come and resolve this for us. Yeah, the other question I think about the new media and
democratized media.
Yeah, I think it's also the same thing, because we don't want any kind of regulation of social media or whatever, especially in this country, because we know that these people are not honest about that. But what can we do as a media organization? I think we need to really make sure that whatever we're reporting, it's accurate and we remain impartial. And I think that way you see people will begin to probably rely more on mainstream media, kind of like to verify some of the things that they are seeing on social media. It is already happening, but but because of the level of the volume of information on social media, it's enormous. You can't even, begin to even count it. So that is why people are now struggling. What can they look for? What can they verify? But I think we have to continue to do more. And also newsroom need to invest more on these issues of fact checking and more of investigative journalism, because that is what will stand us out.
Okay, thank you very much to my journalist. I don't know where that echo is coming from. Apologies. Thank you very much to my journalist, Simon, Shema, Babajide, and Nasiru. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand you over to Motunrayo. She has a few things to say before we close. We wanted to stick to time as much as possible, but there is another session tomorrow, and I'm sure she's going to give you a few details about that. Motunrayo.
Okay, so thank you so much. We had the great time we thought that we would have today. Even though I mean, as an individual, I'm living here sadder than I came. So I was looking forward to the conversations, but they are quite depressing. And I do hope that we can take this up from discussion to action points. How do we get out of this? How do we make the media better? Nigeria needs the media, and but I think that the people are less aware now than they were before how much important that we are. And the mob censorship thing scares me very much. It scares me very much. Just like the looting that happened after against us was scary to see. The generation. But yes, we thank you so much for coming. Thank you for a robust conversation. Thank you for your honesty. The media hardly talks about itself. We're used to talking about other people, but we do need to talk about ourselves, and it's good that we're able to vent our own thoughts too. Tomorrow we will be here at the same time, 12 noon. We're having an generational conversation about media sustainability. We trust that it will also be something to learn from. And on Wednesday, we invite you all to attend physically now at the NECA Hall in Ikeja if you are in Lagos, and if you're able to make it 4 to 6 p.m. COVID-19 protocols will be observed, and we are working hard to making it 4 to 6 p.m. So thank you so much all for your time, and we appreciate your making our time to be here. We hope that the Nigerian media and indeed our country will be better for it. Thank you and bye-bye.
All right, so thank you again. So, tomorrow, as she said, intergenerational dialogue, journalism done now and in the future. And it's a panel that has Motunrayo as well, and about 4 other individuals that will be looking into that. So I think that's really necessary, because this conversation around citizen journalism, this conversation we had now about mob censorship as well, they're very important pieces of a puzzle of how journalism and the media is shaping up in the 21st century Nigeria. And it's very important that we get ahead of some of these things that will be challenges and find out how we as an institution want to deal with them. And I hope we challenge ourselves. We need the trust of the people. We need the confidence of Nigerians to do our jobs better. And it is a difficult time now when so many things are fighting for their attention. So many things are fighting to give them information, whether truthful or not. It just demands that we do our jobs in a much more worthy and trustworthy way. And I hope that's something that we all take away from this. Thank you again to everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism as well. It's day 1, so we hope to see you tomorrow, and we hope to see you on Wednesday as we award and recognize Nigerian journalists who are really putting themselves out there and bringing the necessary stories to the public. Have a very, very pleasant day, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good conversation.
No, no, no. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. I'm in chains, you're in chains too. Our uniforms and you are uniforms too. I'm a prisoner, you're a prisoner too, Mr. Jailer. Oh, I have fears, you have fears too. I'll die, but you said will die too. Life is beautiful, don't you think so too, Mr. Jailer? I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let him is 1,000 be the first to cast a stone, Mr. Jailer. To suppress all my strategies. You oppress every part of me. What you don't know, you're a victim too, Mr. Jailer. Oh, you don't care about my point of view. If I die, another will work for you. So you treat me like a modern slave, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop, prisoner. Let you eat 1,000 be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer. You see, if you walking in the marketplace, down throw stones, telephone. If you do, you just might hit one of your own. Life is not about your policies all the time, so you better rearrange your philosophies. I'm good to your fellow Mandela. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let he who is without sin be the first that cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. We don't have to go to 360 degrees. Now it's time we go the 180. You don't have to climb the highest mountains, for all you're looking for is within you. Open the eyes of your mind, your ears and mouth as I sing my song. Open the eyes of your mind, your ears and mouth as you hear my words. Oh, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee. I'll be waiting, I'll be home. Ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee. I'll be waiting, I'll be wait, but nevertheless it's never late. Oh, see the times have changed. I thought you knew the road would never ever wait for you. The water's gone past times of fighting, so drop your guns and your swords and let us live all as one. We all need love and understanding, so drop your guns and your swords and let us live all as one. Oh, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee. I'll be waiting. Oh, I'll be. Oh, 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 oh. Every nation across the ocean is more than just a garden.